Hi, I'm Cameron, and I don't just read comics, I love them. Welcome back to another episode of Cameron Reads Comics. On today's episode, we're actually going to go through another first issue of a series, a brand new DC Black Label series, Catwoman Lonely City #1. It's right here. There you go. It is really, really good. Just want to start off with that. Okay, so just contextually, I'm not a huge fan of DC's Black Label stuff. The collection, I've only read a few titles, and it left a bad taste in my mouth after it canceled Vertigo. So that I wasn't postured up to be a huge fan of DC's Black Label. I just don't think, I think they're trying to have a platform to share darker stories, and I'm like, I think right now, from a PR perspective, the last thing DC needs is to tell darker stories. Let's put the hope back in comic books. When it came to this title, the reason I picked it up is because I love Cliff Chiang. Cliff Chiang is a really awesome artist who's done really pivotal work on Wonder Woman and Paper Girls. He's done a lot more work, but those are definitely the two titles that resonated best with me. I love his art, and I thought that this series was going to be one of those moments where we could see an artist like really go off. You know, there's so many comic book writers that were amazing artists that came out. And here's just a couple. I made a list to make a few. First two that come to mind are comic people that went into comics for art but ended up just writing, which were Brian Michael Bendis and Donny Cates. Part of their origin stories were like, hey, I want to be a comic artist, but it never worked out. And so then they ended up writing, and they're so awesome at writing. So huge fan of those two. Then there's just some really famous people that are kind of going down the route Cliff Chiang is, and they just became really famous writer-artists. Frank Miller, Sean Murphy, Darwin Cook, Mike Mignola, Todd McFarlane. Just to name a few. Those are the first ones that came into in my head. So I just want you to know that I thought this could be one of those moments, one of the flagship titles that Cliff Chiang makes that leap. And maybe he's written other stuff before and I just don't know about it. But I think this could be one. I wanted to get on the train early. If he is going to be, making that transition, I think it would be great. I saw this as an opportunity to see how an artist could transition into writing. Now, let's talk about the story. There's going to be full spoilers, so that's just a heads up. This book completely caught me off guard. I feel like this take would be like, what if it's The Dark Knight Returns, but with Catwoman? Which it's not as harsh as that though. So I know that's kind of a big swing, but it's the feeling I got. In this universe, there's a huge event called Fool's Day, and it pretty much killed off all of the Bat family. And Catwoman got sent to prison for years. And so 40 years after I think the timeline is 40 years after she became Catwoman. No, she was, this is where the story picks up. And so all of the Bat family are dead for the most part, at least all the males. And the only two surviving members are, Catwoman and Barbara Gordon. So they have a very tumultuous relationship because, Babs thinks that Catwoman was responsible for Batman's death. Whether or not that's actually true is dealer's choice. But there's a level of responsibility in there, and that relationship has been very interesting. But then we get to visit some old villains too. Like, it's Gotham in the future. So not Batman Beyond future, but Dark Knight Returns kind of future, where it's like that far ahead of time. And Catwoman is making her comeback into the city that she once knew, and everything's changed because she's been incarcerated this whole time. And so now, we see the transitions of other members of Batman's Rogues Gallery and other characters in the universe. Harvey Dent has now made the turn and become Gotham's mayor, which personally, if you know me, I'm a huge Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain. So Two-Face being around and making the turn, which I think he's potentially going to be the villain of the series, I'm all for. And then you have Penguin, who has become pretty much as Penguin always does. I think he's the kingpin of the Gotham universe, the Bat family, and so he has financially made himself a mainstay in Gotham. And so, he has his money legally, but he's always wheeling and dealing under the table because that's who he is. But yeah, so we're seeing this area of Gotham in a way we've never seen before. I think that Cliff Chiang nails the extended Gotham universe without Batman currently existing there. So I was a huge fan of that. Let's get into the art, though. Cliff Chiang, I believe he's the only one. He's the writer artist on the series, and I think he does it all digitally, so he's doing the colors too. And it is beautiful. His art, I feel like it's very few and far between where there's the art. Like, I will pick up a book solely based on the artist. Usually I follow writers, and then they'll have a great artist along, and I'll be exposed to new art that way. Cliff Chiang's art is amazing, and so this is one of those things where I picked it up based on the artist. Because again, he's never written anything to my knowledge. So that being the case, I thought this was one of the most excellent takeoff launch points. His color palette is beautiful. The way he draws Selina is beautiful. Gotham, and he uses this almost like two-dimensional color palette, so it doesn't add super depth, like a lot of depth into the images, but there's like a matte, like kind of a flatness to all of it, and that's not a bad thing. I actually think it's one of those situations where you see artists who are so good at their field know what rules they can break and then break them. Like, they know what rules to break, and so when they're breaking them, they're not really breaking it, they're just enhancing it. I think it's one of those things, and I just loved it. You get to see Selina Kyle and her relationship with Gotham in this book, and the way that he draws that, and the way that he shows the rest of the city, I thought was so great. And so I'm a huge fan of this book. Let's just get into the rating. And remember, we don't rate these on a 1 to 5 scale because it's only a first issue. It's the first chapter in a series. So my rating is always, am I going to pick up the second issue? Because that's the job of this book. And the answer is an astounding, absolutely yes. I'm definitely going to pick up the second issue. This book caught me off guard. I thought Cliff Chiang was a powerhouse, and he did one of those things especially. I think the greatest strength of this book was the lack of text, because the one thing I find artists know how to do the absolute best is tell the story in the panels. They don't need to reiterate through the text what's going on. And Cliff Chiang absolutely nails that in the story. So I'll gladly pick up the next volume, and I can't wait. So remember, I'm Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them. Make sure to clobber those like and subscribe buttons. And if you want to check out my podcast, go check it out on Spotify and iTunes. Cameron Reads Comics. See you next time.